The situation in the war in Ukraine has taken another 180-degree turn. In recent months, Russia had been advancing. Very slowly, yes, and with heavy casualties, but it was advancing. In December of last year, for example, the Institute for the Study of War estimated that Russian forces controlled about 520,000 square kilometers more than the previous month. That's a little more than the area of Andorra. However, the trend has reversed again. In April, Russia lost 116,000 square kilometers, and in May, another 280,000. What is happening? Well, everything points to the fact that Ukraine's strategy of attacking Russia's logistics network is finally paying off. A strategy in which drones play a central role.
Ukraine surpassed Russia for the first time in the number of attack drone launches per month. In March, Ukraine launched 7,347 drones against 6,462 Russian devices. The data indicates a possible shift in the balance of power in the drone war in favor of Kiev.
There has been a lot of talk about drones, and for good reason. World War I began on horseback and ended with tanks and automatic weapons. Well, in Ukraine, we're seeing something similar. In 2022, Ukraine produced fewer than 2,000 military drones, and many in the military were skeptical that these flying machines could change the rules of war. But these days, no one doubts their effectiveness, and projections indicate that by 2026, Ukraine will manufacture 7 million drones. According to Volodymyr Zelensky himself, Russia is suffering between 30 and 35,000 casualties each month, counting both wounded and killed. Other sources put the figure at 25,000, but in reality, the exact number doesn't matter. The important thing is, how many do you think are due to drones? 30%? Half? Well, no. Drones are already responsible for 90% of Russian casualties. It's absolutely crazy, and it doesn't end there. For Ukraine, drones play 3 crucial roles. The first we just saw, inflicting casualties on the enemy, but they also play a defensive role, particularly by intercepting Russian drones. And last but not least, they've also become the Ukrainian military's favorite tool for striking Russia where it hurts most. More than 100 kilometers from the front lines, at its oil refineries, ammunition depots, supply transport routes, you name it. To give you an idea, between February and May of this year, the number of attacks more than 20 kilometers away has quadrupled. But anyway, if you follow VisualEconomik, you already know all this. What you might not understand fully is how on earth Ukraine managed to beat Russia in the drone race. Because keep in mind, even though Ukraine started using drones earlier, by the end of 2025, Russia was producing more and attacking more with them, which is exactly what we'd expect from a country with 10 times the GDP and 4 times the military budget. These days, however, it's the Ukrainians who dominate the skies, with more drones and, above all, better quality ones. How is this possible? Why has Russia fallen behind in the drone race, while Ukraine has soared ahead? What have the Ukrainians done that the Russians haven't? And what does all this mean for the war? In this video, we'll answer all these questions. But first, if you're interested in the world of investing, if you want to learn how to manage your savings, protect yourself against inflation, and figure out how to make money beyond your day job, I've got some news for you. At Visual Factory, we've created the Visual Factory Club, a newsletter where every week we send out free content focused on essential financial education, the ABC of what everyone should know to understand the stock market, financial markets in general, investment platforms, how to assess investment opportunities, and which markets may have more or less potential. Because of course, if you want to invest your money so you're not at the mercy of your country's economic instability, you at least need to understand the basics of the financial world. In the Visual Factory Club, you'll learn all of this completely free of charge. Through the link below and this QR code, you can sign up for the club and start receiving the upcoming editions. What's more, when you sign up, you'll receive a dossier where I explain in a clear and simple way the most essential investment concepts, what multiples or the PE ratio are, what indices are, ETFs, derivatives, funds, EPS, you get the idea. After that, every week you'll receive additional materials and market analysis to help you stay informed about what's going on. And by the way, the sooner you sign up, the better. Since we send each episode of the series by email, and every edition is unique, if you're not subscribed, you might miss some of them, and you won't be able to access them later. That said, let's get back to Ukraine. On the 3rd of June, several Ukrainian drones struck military and energy infrastructure right in the heart of St. Petersburg. A few hours later, a sort of Davos forum, which Putin had set up to impress the rest of the world, was set to begin, but it achieved the exact opposite. The air defenses were unable to stop the Ukrainian drones. The airport had to close, and all of this let me say it again, happened on Russian soil. And this is not an isolated incident. In February, Ukraine broke its own record by attacking a refinery in the Komi Republic in the far north of Russia, after traveling 1,770 kilometers. In total, it's estimated that in May of this year alone, Ukrainian drones struck Russian energy facilities 30 times, including oil refineries, tankers, offshore facilities, and oil pipelines. In fact, Ukraine has struck 24 of the country's 33 most important refineries. It's difficult to know exactly how much damage this has caused Russia, but some analyses estimate that in April alone, these attacks wiped out the capacity to refine some 300 to 400,000 barrels of crude oil. And given that gasoline prices have skyrocketed by 50% since January in Putin's country, that figure seems plausible. Some people are saying no, that Russia hasn't even flinched at these attacks. After all, it's exporting record amounts of crude oil. And yes, that's true, but that is precisely the proof that these attacks have done the country a lot of harm. If it's selling its crude oil, it's because it can't refine it. In any case, we've already said that long-range attacks are just one example of what Ukraine can do with its drones, and it's not even the area where we've seen the most innovation. After all, Russia is also capable of attacking Ukrainian infrastructure from miles away. According to the UN, in April, Russian drones killed 238 civilians, as most attacks on Ukraine target residential or civilian infrastructure. And this is no coincidence. Keep this detail in mind because it will be crucial later on. Fortunately, this is precisely where Ukraine is innovating the most. In drone interception.
According to President Volodymyr Zelensky, 94% of those long-range drones and 73% of the missiles were successfully intercepted. In comparison, on May 14, 2025, Kyiv's forces took down 55% of Russian drones launched nationwide. Ukraine is getting better at defending its skies.
Drones are the future of war because to intercept a $50,000 piece of junk, you need to launch a $4 million Patriot missile. I'm sure you've heard something like that countless times. Look, in reality, a Patriot has almost never been fired at a drone. There are much cheaper ways to defend yourself, but at the heart of it, the statement remains true. Defending against a drone attack is very expensive, or at least it was, until the situation took another 180-degree turn. Let me introduce you to the P-1 Sun interceptor drones manufactured by Skyfall, a Ukrainian company that also produces them using 3D printing. These drones shoot out at 300 kilometers per hour, can fly up to an altitude of 9,000 meters, and travel more than 30 kilometers. But the most striking thing is their price. For just, get this, $1,000, a P-1 Sun can intercept a $50,000 Sahed drone. Clearly, for that price, the results are spectacular. You've already seen that the interception rate of Russian drones has skyrocketed over the past year. Of course, such a high success rate wouldn't be possible without the other side of Ukraine's defenses, the hand guiding its interceptors, SkyMap. SkyMap is software that uses artificial intelligence to analyze thousands of radars, sensors, and even cell phone signals to detect threats. This time, we're talking about an American invention, not a Ukrainian one, but it's the Ukrainians who are getting the most out of it. VisualEconomik community, if we had to pick just one difference between Russian and Ukrainian drones, it would undoubtedly be the use of AI. Here, data collection via the Starlink network and its processing by Palantir's tools have been critical. And the results are clear. Want an example? Well, take a look at how Russia and Ukraine prevent the opposing side from jamming their drone signals. This technique, known as jamming, is one of the main defensive barriers against long-range drone attacks. To get around this, both Russia and Ukraine came up with a fairly simple but effective solution. If the problem is that they are interfering with our signal, we'll attach a fiber optic cable to the drone and send all instructions via the cable. It's like when your Wi-Fi isn't working and you try connecting the router via cable. The problem is that once you've traveled 20 kilometers, the fiber optic cable starts to get heavy. That is, if it hasn't broken or gotten tangled in a tree. Plus, the price of fiber has skyrocketed. A 50-kilometer roll that cost about $300 a year ago now costs $2,500. This is why Ukraine's commitment to using AI to enable drones to fly autonomously without needing any signals is so important.
to address interference, which poses a significant challenge for FPV drone pilots. A confidential project led by former Google CEO Eric Schmidt has been providing the Ukrainian military with technologies since the winter of 2024 that enable drones to be piloted using artificial intelligence software.
In Ukraine, artificial intelligence and drones are inseparable. We've seen the case of SkyMap, which is primarily defensive, but also plays a key role in offensive operations. That's where the Hornets come in. These are drones capable of flying 200 kilometers with 5-kilogram warheads. Their price, about $5,000, 14 times cheaper than the most similar Russian drones. These drones can fly far beyond the front lines and strike Russian logistics centers and even moving vehicles. Of course, these drones also benefit enormously from the entire Starlink ecosystem. Here, more than anywhere else, we see the difference between how Russia and Ukraine operate their drones. The Hornets, by the way, are another example of technology originally from the US that the Ukrainians have taken to the next level, and that is the real issue. So far, we've seen how Russian drones differ from Ukrainian ones. However, this doesn't answer the question we started this video with. Why is Russia, despite having a much larger military budget, falling behind in the technology race? The answer, as is almost always the case in economic matters, lies in incentives. Russia is a massive country with plenty of recruits to send to the front lines as cannon fodder, and without very good relations with technologically advanced countries. Yes, China and Iran have supported Russia. The Shahed drones come from Iran, and the vast majority of Russian-made drones have Chinese engines and batteries, but Putin has nothing comparable to Starlink or Palantir. And do you remember when we mentioned earlier that most Russian drone attacks target civilian infrastructure rather than military targets? It's no coincidence. Russia is blind. Without Starlink or anything like it, the Russians can only send their drones toward large, static targets like buildings or power plants. Without intelligence, investing in drones loses a lot of its appeal. Furthermore, Ukraine has the advantage of terrain, while Russia has to establish supply lines that are highly vulnerable to drone attacks. In short, Russia isn't leading this race, partly because it isn't all that interested in it. Right now, launching a conventional artillery barrage remains a better strategy, because this artillery can't be blocked by drones. Even so, this is only half the story. Although drones aren't Putin's top priority, they have invested heavily in them, and by the end of last year, it seemed that all this effort was paying off. Production figures were sky high, but their performance on the battlefield has been disappointing. Among other things, due to a lack of talent. Putin offers a lot of money, and perks like commuted prison sentences to conscripts who go to the front lines. But this approach doesn't convince everyone.
Although this approach has proved to be an effective way of drawing unskilled new soldiers, it has not attracted a corresponding body of technical specialists who can command reasonable salaries in the civilian or military-industrial economy. The Russian army, for example, is far below its recruitment targets for drone operators.
According to the Foreign Policy Research Institute, when Russia set out to expand its workforce of drone operators and engineers, they filled only 16% of the positions in 4 months. They eventually filled all the positions, yes, but they likely filled them with a lot of novices. Truly qualified people simply do not want to go to the battlefield. In Ukraine, obviously, there has also been a significant brain drain, but the engineers who have stayed are much more willing to work side by side with the military than their Russian counterparts. In fact, it's striking that many of the drone models Ukraine is using most right now started as small projects that have scaled up. In Russia, on the other hand, everything comes from the top. And ultimately, this is the main difference between the two models. The military sector employs 4.5 million Russians, and 1 in 10 citizens is connected to this sector either directly or through a family member. It is also a massive sector that also depends on very few companies, which are also gigantic, such as Rostec or the famous Kalashnikov. This works for producing lots of tanks and ammunition, but what about innovation? That's where the seams of the Russian model start to show. Ukraine, on the other hand, has opted for a bottom-up approach. Every battalion, every company, and even groups of volunteers can launch a pilot project, and if it works, it's scaled up. That's how the army started using its drones, and the results have been excellent. Plus, the Ukrainian army has an ace up its sleeve to manage all this chaos. An ace that also explains why we're discussing this topic on this channel, VisualEconomik. Check it out.
Following the launch of the E-Point system, Ukraine introduced Brave One Market, a defense technology marketplace for soldiers. Think of it as an Amazon-style hub featuring over 1,000 items: UAVs, ground robots, electronic warfare, and signals intelligence systems, AI-powered tools, software, and munitions.
What is the best way to allocate resources in a decentralized manner amid extreme uncertainty? Exactly, markets. And that's precisely what Ukraine has done. It all started as a pilot project that awarded points to each battalion for things like achieving enemy casualties, capturing soldiers, shooting down drones, or neutralizing artillery launchers. Then, each unit could use those points to purchase different types of drones and other supplies. The idea is to cut through red tape and simplify procedures so that each unit can buy what best suits its needs. And apparently this program worked so well that it was later expanded to the Brave One marketplace with over 1,000 items. Mind you, we're not saying that Ukraine now manages its entire army through Amazon. Far from it. But it is a very significant example that contrasts two very different models of the military. Russia is enormous, and its model takes full advantage of this, mobilizing a massive amount of resources, both human and military. However, Ukraine has also known how to make the most of its advantages. It can operate in a much more decentralized manner, has the logistical support of many Western countries, and can strike Russia at critical points to cripple its army, no matter how many soldiers and how much ammunition it has. Anyway, now that we've reached this point, it's your turn. Were you aware of the leap Ukraine has made with drones in recent months? Do you think Russia will fall behind, or will it regain the initiative? Of all the reasons we've mentioned, which do you think is the most significant in explaining Ukraine's success with these flying machines? You can leave your answers down in the comments. And if you want to understand what's really happening in the markets and learn how to manage your money with more confidence, join the Visual Factory Club. It's completely free, and the link is in the description. As always, don't forget that here on VisualEconomik, we release new videos every week, so subscribe to this channel and click the bell icon so you don't miss any of our updates. If you liked this video, hit like, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care, I'll see you next time.